Hi, everybody. Welcome to second session in this series of webinars. Today, we're going to be looking at GA4 installation and configuration. In session one, we just covered an overview of GA4, and what I'd like to go through today is how we actually start the process of installing GA4 and getting it all configured and working for you. In session three, the next session, will be starting to look at a very important part, which is migrating from Universal Analytics to GA4. But today, what we're going to focus on is really just the installation and configuration of GA4 as if Universal Analytics didn't exist. And there's a very important part, or it's a very important reason for that, and that's that we want to treat Google Analytics 4 differently to Universal Analytics. We can't assume that Universal Analytics has previously been installed correctly. They're two quite different products, and therefore it's an opportunity for you to start implementing Google Analytics correctly and start from this. There are some steps that you need to go through to migrate from Universal Analytics to GA4, but again, we'll be covering that in a bit more detail on the next session. So we'll start with the installation side of things first of all, and there's a document all about this on Google. It's quite a large document, goes into quite some detail, but it's this document here, and this takes you through how to set up analytics for a website and or an app. Today, we're going to focus primarily on getting GA4 set up for a website. And in fact, most of the webinars are going to focus on the web side of things, or website side of things, rather than applications. This document does go into a lot of detail, and I'm not going to read it out Jackanory style to you, but it's a useful reference for you when you're going through this installation process. I break the installation into two parts. There's one, the configuration of all of the settings in Google Analytics's own web interface. And then there's the installation of the code itself. And the installation of the code can be deployed via by a plugin, an app, a module for your website or your store. We can also hard code it with what used to be called gtag.js, but is now called the Google tag. Even if you search Google for how to set Google tag up or how to install Google Tag, you tend to get references to Google Tag Manager because they're going through this transition in the naming of that part. And Google Tag is essentially what gtag.js was, and it's the code we'll be looking at in a moment. Google Tag Manager celebrated its 10th birthday at the weekend, but Google Tag Manager is an application, a tag management platform that many people use to consolidate all of their tracking. So you've got those three options. The first two, app plugin module and the hard coding, are essentially the same. It's just that the app, the plugin, or the module does the hard coding for you. So really two methods, Tag Manager or Google Tag is what we're looking at. But let's start off with the web property and how we actually go about configuring that. So first of all, you need to go to your analytics account, which is on analytics.google.com. You'll probably find that this account's already got Universal Analytics set up. It's maybe even got GA4 property configured already. And if you want to create a new GA4 property, it's probably a good time to do that. If you've had a bit of a go at GA4 in the past and you've just installed it and forgot about it, then you can go back and tidy that up. But again, this session I'm going to focus on starting from afresh. But if you've already got a GA4 property set up, then by all means follow through this guide and go and make changes to your configuration as you want. Or if you just want to start again, then again that's not a problem either. Now, you'll see that the admin interface for GA4 is fairly similar to that for Universal Analytics, but there's one big thing that's missing. In Universal Analytics, we had account, property, and views, but GA4 has dropped the view feature, and now we just have account and property. All of the segmentation, all of the different things that used to happen in an independent view can now be done as an exploration within GA4. There are still situations though where you may want to have two GA4 properties. A number of people have that requirement. It tends to be when people have got multiple websites, an organization that might say have let's say 40 websites, and what you probably have is a GA4 property for each of the websites, but you would then probably have a global GA4 property that that allows you to see the entire estate across one GA4 property. So that can still be put in place, and later down the line we'll look at using different methods to track an additional property. But for the moment, let's focus just on one GA4 property. Now, along here, you can see we've got account settings, account access management, filters, account change history, and the rubbish bin if you're in the UK, or trash can if you're in other parts of the world. The account settings deal these days mainly with data sharing and privacy and that sort of stuff. So make sure that you've got all of these things ticked that are required and relevant to you. The most important one is this one here, the tick in the box for Google products and services. If you don't tick that box, then you won't get a good flow of data between Google's other services, such as Google Ads, Google Merchant Center, Google Search Console, and so on. So if you want that, go through there, of course, read in detail through the terms and conditions and press accept. If you want benchmarking information, technical support, or anybody at Google to hassle you, then tick these boxes here as well. And many of you will be subject to GDPR, depending what region you're in and where you get your traffic from, and so on. But you can manage the all of that side of things through here as well. So not a lot has changed in this side of things. But you can put your legal entities in there and the contacts for the DPA side of things. But just to recap, the main thing here is make sure that you're sharing data between analytics and Google's other products and services. A lot of people miss this tick box out because it is so far out of the way from what you'd normally access. Account access management simply allows you to grant access to other users or groups of users. Here we can set the roles that we have available to now administrator, which gives full control of the account, allows you to add, remove users and change everything, including deleting the account or deleting the original administrator. So be aware of that. We've got editor. This allows people to edit data in the settings. It's the same as administrator. It just means that you can't manage users. You can't delete the administrator. And this is the setting that most people have who are responsible for reporting within analytics. You tend to have one administrator, usually the owner of the business, or the or a role-based email address, marketing app, for example, would have that administrator privilege. Occasionally you might want to share assets such as dashboards, annotations, etc. with other people, and you might want to give them the analyst role, which is a new role. Historically, we just had admin, editor, and viewer. If you want an external agency, or if you want somebody just to view reports, then you can assign them the viewer role as well. Or there is this strange one of no role, and the reason that the no role is in there is because you could perhaps give people access just to certain properties underneath an account, but you don't want to have them access to the whole account or account level. You can restrict data for certain properties. You can restrict cost metrics and revenue metrics. So if you've got sensitive financial data in there for your ad spend or your revenue, then you can block those out if you wanted to. And you might want to do that if you're speaking to an external agency who is working on, let's say, SEO or social or some other part that is not necessarily related to them being able to see costs and revenue, and you might want to hide that if you don't have an NDA in place with them, or if you don't know them that well. So you've got a bit more control now. Again, this is a new thing with GA4, being able to hide the cost and revenue metrics. And simply to add a person, all you do is put their email address in there. They do need to have a Google account. Doesn't need to be a Gmail email account, but it needs to be an email address that has a Google account associated with it for them to be added to analytics. And if you tick this box, I usually keep it ticked. As soon as you've added the person, then they'll get an email notification. Moving on now to the property side of things, I'm going to take you through a new creation of a property. We've already got one property that's set up here. You'll notice quite a few options now in this part, and I'll take you through most of these. Some of them aren't going to be relevant for what we're discussing today, but let's go ahead and create a property. And this is the first step that you would go through to get started with GA4, is creating a property. Now, a property tends to be associated with one website or a small group of websites. And when I talk about a small group of websites, it tends to be for one purpose. So it could be, let's say, for example, it could be a hotel with one website for the main hotel website. It could have a room booking system platform, so it could be a different domain name that there's a booking system on, and it could have a restaurant booking system, again might be hosted on a different domain, and perhaps could have a spa management system, again could be hosted on a different domain. So it tends to be one organization, one URL, or sorry, one domain, or a small group of URLs and domains that focus on the one business. Now, when you first set it up, you tend to call the name of the property would tend to relate to the organization itself, or the organization unit. If you've got a chain of hotels and they'd each got different websites, then you would have a different property for each of the websites. If you just got one website that got everything on, then it will be the name of the organization or that part of the organization. So in this case, this is just our test website at the moment, although we'll very soon be an Internet of Things solution provider. But in this case, I'm just going to call it Alano website. And it seems strange, but at the moment I've been calling properties, or I've been including GA4 in the name of the property, just so it's very clear when people are accessing what's Universal Analytics, what's GA4. In the middle of next year, we'll probably do away with that. as the Universal Analytics properties get archived. But for now, I'm just including that in the property name, just so it's very clear when you're signing into analytics which property is which. Reporting time zones are quite important. The reporting time zone tends to be where the majority of your audience are. So even if you're a UK business, but 90% of your business came from the US, then you would set the time zone as the US. But it tends to be where the bulk of your audience is based, or what your ad accounts, or your biggest ad account, the time zone that's set in, and it's mainly there so you can understand the relationship with targeting in, let's say, Google Ads that got a campaign for the US and a smaller campaign for other parts of the world. In most cases, though, it is the country in which the business is based. You've got a couple of options here. You can just select GMT. What I tend to select, though, is United Kingdom time, and that makes it a bit easier, particularly at this time of year as we're getting closer to the clocks going back. Again, put the time zone in there rather than just GMT, unless you're just using GMT or another time zone for everything else. The setting for the currency is really important to get this right. The way that GA4 works is similar to Universal Analytics Enhanced E-commerce. And what it does is it uses the currency as the base currency. So let's say, for example, if you've got a website that all of your bills you pay for in GBP, but you take payment in pounds, US dollars, and let's say euros. What would happen then when the transaction is completed? The purchase event records the revenue that has been received, and it records the currency code. And what will then happen is Google will automatically do the exchange rate conversion for you based on the previous day's conversion or exchange rate, and it will do that calculation for you. So all of the data will still show as revenue in the revenue in GBP for reporting purposes, but it's also possible for you to dig down and get all the US transactions or Euro transactions. But this must be the what you would class as the base currency, so what most of your transactions are done in. But you can then in the code declare the currency that people actually pay with. Now, you'll notice one big change here. You can edit these property details later in admin. Really important thing. In Universal Analytics, once you'd set the time zone and once you'd set the currency, the only people who could change it were Google themselves, and you would have to submit a request to get them to change that. This is now different in GA4, but it comes with a warning. If you were to run the GA4 property with one currency for a month and then change the currency, then it's going to screw up all of the data, the revenue data, because you've changed the base currency. So then doing comparisons month on month, for example, or week on week, might get a bit tricky, because you've then got to work out what was the currency before, what was it now. So decide really early on what you want your base currency to be, and it tends to be what you pay for your products and services in. That's as a very rough guide, what most of your products and services are paid for in, and again relating to what most of your customers what currency they use. We do have some advanced options when we're setting up a GA4 property. The advanced options aren't very advanced. It's basically, do you want to create a universal analytics property at the same time? And the answer now is always no, thank you. So you would always leave that one off. They've changed it fairly recently, so we've now got this red / salmony coloured warning here. But we don't want to create a universal analytics property. If you did have an absolute requirement to set up a universal analytics property, then you would select that option, and then you can choose to just create a universal analytics property if you wanted that. What I would never do is create both a GA4 and a universal analytics property together, because you'd then merging two properties of different types together, and that gets really complicated. So if you do need to create a universal analytics property, tick that box, but just create a universal analytics property. But most of you, for the purpose of this, we're of course talking about GA4, they just go for setting up the GA4 property. Then go to next. This bit is all optional, industry category, business size, that sort of stuff. Google claim that if you fill that information in, then they'll give you relevant benchmarking data, but in reality is a bit rubbish. So just save time, I normally skip through that. If you want to provide them with that data, then please do, but I don't bother. So just click on create. And then we're presented with the data stream section. And at the moment, we've got three choices here. We can have web, Android app, or iOS app. We're going to be talking just about web in these sessions, so we'll go for the web platform. We then have to give the data stream a name and a website URL. So in this case, I'm going to use just our test site. And rather frustratingly, when you go to paste that in, it will put in the HTTPS and all the slashes as well. And when you move to the next part, it will say it needs to be a valid URL. So Google are unfortunately not intelligent enough to strip off these bits that you want stripping off. So it's just what I would call the host name. So in this case, subdomain, domain, GTLD. You've got a choice of HTTPS or HTTP. Hope none of you've got any HTTP only sites there anymore. This is quite a common mistake that people make, though, as they're going through this process, they accidentally click on HTTP and then go and fill the details in. If you actually do that, then it will prevent data flowing into the GA4 property. I saw one last week actually with that exact issue. And the reason for that is now most of Google's APIs require secure data transfer. They require HTTPS. They won't transmit data insecurely. So you watch out for that one. I think we're going to see more of those because it's quite easy to accidentally select the wrong one. So make sure it's HTTPS. Here, just make sure that you've got the host name in. So no slashes, no HTTPS : / or anything like that. We've then got stream name, and I'm just going to call this Elano Shopify store. And there we go. Now, by default, Google will use what it calls now enhanced measurement. And what this allows you to do is automatically track page views, scrolls, outbound clicks, searches that people make on the website, engagement with video. More about that in a moment, because there's some extra stuff you need to check and make sure that works, and file download. So it'll do that automatically. If we look at the settings for that, if you don't want any of those automatically recording, then you can disable them if you want to. So for the moment, we'll leave these all on, and then we'll click create stream. And that's it done. So now essentially what's happened is we've got the GA4 property set up, and we've got the website over here. And then in the middle, we've got what Google now call their web stream. And this is a conduit between the website and GA4. It's how we get data from the website and push it into the reporting interface. Now, you can see here that it's given the stream name, the name that we chose. We've got the stream URL now in there, correctly formed. We have a stream ID. You don't tend to need to use the stream ID very often, but the one big thing you are going to need is the measurement ID. And the measurement ID is what in Universal Analytics used to be called the Analytics Tracking ID or the Property ID. Or it used to be UA hyphen and then some numbers. But this one follows the format G dash and then some characters after that. So you will need that for the installation of the code, either for the application, Google Tag Manager, or to pass on to a developer to put the code in for you. At this point, we can go and view the tag instructions. We want to do that, and then it will take you through the installation instructions, and it will give you a couple of choices here. We can install with the website builder or install manually. If you've got Drupal, Duda, Monster Insights, Typo3 or Wix, then you can automatically integrate this way. I wouldn't suggest you use any of those options. And there we go. If we go install manually, then we can see the basic code, and then we can see Google Tag Manager. But we'll come back to that in a moment, and I'll show you why we do that, because there's often changes that you want to put in place to get that working. So let's just go back and look at the web stream details now. We've looked at this top row here. We can see enhanced measurement is on. We have the opportunity to modify events. Now, there won't be any events because we've just set this up and it's not live yet. But as people do things on the website, as they view pages, as they click links, as they download things and purchase and that sort of stuff, then this massive list of events will start to appear, and we can go and modify those. And that's something that you may want to do. One thing to watch out for though here is what I've seen a lot of people do is go straight into modify events, realize that they've got no purchase event or no page view, and actually go and create it. So they'll actually go and create an event. Don't do that. Let the code do the events for you. The problem that occurs here, and it took me about 4 or 5 hours to learn the hard way for this one, but what I found was quite a big e-commerce site. It seemed to be double reporting all of the add to carts. Every time somebody pressed add to cart, we saw the code execute, we saw the item be added to the cart, and then in GA4 it got added to the cart again every time. And I ripped the code to pieces. I had a look at everything. I just couldn't work it out. And then I found that the customer had added an event. And what this actually does is create something called an event listener. So it listens for, in this case, it was the add to cart event. And when it sees an add to cart event occurs, then it sends another add to cart event to GA4. So as soon as we deleted that, then the data was right and you only got that. So please don't touch this side of things until you've started to see some data come in. Once you've got the data in there, then by all means modify the events if you need to, but don't create events in here. It's not very well documented at all, this, and a lot of people think they've got to manually go and set their events up, but you don't. That's all done within the code itself. You can create custom events as well. And this, again, at this point, I wouldn't suggest using the customized events at this point when you're setting things up. All of the events I would suggest you set up in code. Malik has asked, would I be able to give an example of when to correctly modify events? Yeah, it's a really good question. What can happen in some cases is, and if we take the example of a hotel that has got table bookings and room bookings, you might have the same event name for table bookings and hotel bookings or room bookings. So it might be called purchase. And what you probably want to do in that case is separate it out. So you'd modify the event to identify what was a room booking and what was a table booking. Is that sort of stuff where you might want to segment the different types of events. Or if you've got a booking platform that covers multiple restaurants, then you might want to modify the event to say if the table booking occurs on a URL that matches this pattern, then it's restaurant 1 that the booking is for, or if it occurred on this other pattern, then it's restaurant 2, for example. Again, most people don't need to use that sort of things. It just tends to be for when the data is not quite as you need it to be. So it's something that we will be looking at this. We'll probably look at that in session 8 when you've got loads of data that's being built up, and then we can start tidying things up and restructuring things to make sure that everything is really fine-tuned. But that is a fine-tuning thing, really. But thanks for asking the question. It's yeah, but for the moment, don't touch it. We've then got measurement protocol API secrets, and this is what we would class as an advanced part of GA4. And what we use this for is getting offline data or server-side data over to GA4. So it's not something that you would need to do on a typical setup for a website, but one of the things that you probably will need to use that for, if you've got an online store, you may, very few of the online store platforms provide support for processing refunds. So let's take, for example, Shopify. If a customer went through, purchased something from your store, you shipped it to them, they received it, and then they realized they didn't want a product, they sent it back to you, you would then refund them. Within Shopify itself, you would process the refund, but by default, that refund won't be visible on GA4. But what we can do is using something called a webhook, and the measurement protocol is you could then say, Shopify, when a refund happens, push that data all back into Google Analytics, and it would do that using the measurement protocol API. So it's something that we use quite a lot. We use it for processing refunds and e-commerce sites, but we also use it for tracking data through CRM systems. We use it for environmental tracking, temperature sensors, footfall counters, all sorts of physical sensors. We use the measurement protocol to get that data, the offline data, if you like, into GA4. That's what measurement protocols for. I'm going to do a completely separate series of webinars on that. It's a massive part of GA4, and it first became available in Universal Analytics, and in fact that was one of the big sellers for Universal Analytics, is that it can track anything, and GA4 has extended that even further. But it's a very, very useful tool, but not for today, for a basic setup. We can then have a look at this section here. It's called Google Tag. a few weeks ago, Google started to change the name of the gtag.js, the code that we use to track GA4, and you can also track Google Ads with it. They've changed the name now to Google Tag, and it was really confusing historically, because what we had was gtag.js code that sat on a domain called Google Tag Manager, but it wasn't Google Tag Manager code, and it just got really messy. So Google at the moment have split it into two things. They've called it Google Tag, and we've got Google Tag Manager. At some point in the future, it may get merged even closer together, and we may just have Google Tag and then tags for different platforms such as Google Tag Manager, GA4, and Google Ads. But we're still not quite sure. I don't even know if Google are quite sure which way they're going on that. But this is actually quite an important part for your setup, particularly if you've got multiple domains. Within Universal Analytics, it was possible to do something called cross-domain tracking. In classic analytics, we used to call it cookie passing, and we had to manually code that. But GA4 actually does a very good job of cross-domain tracking. Now, the vast majority of accommodation sites, hotels, self-catering, B&Bs, most of those will have an external booking system. And what you need to do with the external booking system is make sure that you are tracking data from the main website through to the booking platform, and then make sure that all of that data is attributed to the source of traffic that it came from. So Google, Facebook, whatever it might be. So what you can see down here is you've got automatic event detection. This is the first thing. So this is just an extension of what we saw earlier, where you can change what automatically gets tracked. So we don't need to really do anything about that unless you really don't want to track any of those things automatically. But you'll notice in here, what we can see is we've got a configure your domains section. And what this will show us is the opportunity to add additional domains. So we can put another condition in there. So you can say include domains that match the following conditions. So we've got contains, begins with, ends with, exactly matches, or matches regular expression. So what you would tend to have is contains, and then it could be booking-system.com, or whatever the domain name is for the booking system, and that would then bind all of that data together. So automatically then, if somebody comes to the website, goes through to make a booking on the booking system, then the revenue will be attributed to the right source medium of traffic. Historically, we had to do quite complicated what's called link decoration or form decoration, form link decoration. There's all sorts of different things we went through, and with a lot of the booking system providers, ticketing providers, that was always a real pain. But it's much easier now with GA4. There are some situations where it doesn't work, and it depends how the booking system is set up, but you do have full control over this, and there is also a manual setup option there as well that you can actually do in code if you need to. But in most cases, from what we've seen so far in GA4, it works really well. Subdomain tracking, if you've got booking.yourwebsite.com and yourwebsite.com, that tends to work without having to do anything here. But occasionally you might have to put your subdomains in there as well. But in most cases it works pretty well. So remember that if you've got more than one domain or more than one subdomain, then do make sure that you configure your domains in there as well. When we go through in the next session, migrating from Universal Analytics to GA4, we can actually look at the data in Universal Analytics to see what domains have been tracked, and then we can move those over to the configure your domain section. I'll give an example of that in session 3. And Liam's just asked a question. I assume we aren't talking about third-party payment gateways, e.g. PayPal. No, the third-party payment service providers, likes of PayPal, WorldPay, SagePay, those sort of things, we don't need to worry about those because the tracking code, the Universal Analytics or GA4 tracking code is not actually on those platforms. What happens in that case is the traffic comes from the website, goes out to the payment service provider, and then comes back in. And GA4 in most cases does a very good job of tracking that flow all the way through. Within Universal Analytics, we had to set up something called a referral exclusion in some cases, because it would create 2 sessions. But with GA4, it handles it much better. And then this final section here is include user provided data from your website. So in this case, what we can do is you can say, I want to use the user provided data. So if I tick that, then what you can do is collect that data. So you can manually configure it, so you can decide what data wants to go in there. But there are a lot of disclaimers to this. The data has to be processed and hashed in a certain way. Now, Google in most cases will deal with that for you with the automatic collection, but in some cases you might have to manually specify information, things like email address, name, those sort of things. Now, this data is not going to show in GA4, but it can be used for better insights, setup of audiences, and those sort of things as well. But in most cases, if you do want to have that extra data in there, then just select the automatic collection. Now, at the moment, there's a bit of a loophole in GA4 within Google Ads. If you try using just a normal conversion ID tag, a Google Ads tag, you can't target, or you can't have an audience set up for any sensitive industries, things like medicine, financial services, weapons, alcohol, that sort of stuff. But you can import those audiences that have been set up in GA4 and target those people based on that. So if you do work with any of those what Google classes sensitive industries, then the audiences within GA4 can be imported into Google Ads, and you can target them as well. How long it's going to be before they close that loophole, I don't know. I'm certainly not telling them about it, but it's, yeah, if you do need to do that, then use that method. And part of that will use this user provided data as well to get in there, because it's not allowed in any of those sensitive ones. So that was configure tag settings. We've got manage connected site tags, and what you can do if you want to is load tags for additional properties or products using the stream's on-page Google tag. I'm not going to go through that in this case because that's a more advanced technique that we would use if you've got the need to track multiple tags. We've then got view tag instructions, and this takes you into the section we saw earlier on, which then leads you on to the part where you actually have to get the code installed on the website. Now, if you went down the manual installation route, then basically Google say, oh, if you just put this piece of code in, everything will work and it'll be brilliant. In reality, that's not the case. It will work for all of the standard events, page views, scrolls, those sort of things, downloads of things. So for non-transactional websites, in the main, that works. And if you just gave your developer that code and got them to paste it into the right place, it would work, and you would start recording GA4 traffic. But if you've got anything beyond a brochure website, a very standard website, then just this code on its own is not going to do it. If you've got an online shop, if you've got a booking system, then you're going to have to make other changes to configure that separately, in addition to this code here. That takes us on to then the code options that you've got. So you can deploy the code. Let's say, for example, if it's Shopify, you can use an app to deploy that code for you. You could use an app to deploy Google Tag Manager and then deploy the GA4 tracking code that way. Or the other option is you get your web developer to implement the Google tag for you themselves. So you've got those three options really. The easy option is the app plugin or module, because they're built to do the job for the platforms that you're working with. But the downside of those is most of them are charged for. I think there's only I think there is probably WordPress and WooCommerce is probably the only one that have got a free plugin. I think Squarespace may have a plugin now as well. All the others tend to be charged for, and we actually we've written a GA4 application for Shopify that does everything for you, track all the e-commerce events, and that's in place at the moment. But you could also use a Google Tag Manager app to do the same thing. So you've got to choose which way you want to go with it, and much of that depends on the platform that you're on and the developer that you've got. If you've got a good developer, if you are a developer, then you can implement the code yourself, and the documentation is very good on where to put the code and how to install that, and there's reference material at the bottom of this document with how to go about that. If you want to use an app plugin or module, again, that's the easy option. Just choose one that is right for you, for your platform, and then normally all you would have to do is just go and get the measurement ID and paste the measurement ID into that plugin or app, and then the software will take care of it itself for you. If you choose the manual coding route, then again, there are resources that are available online for that. If you go to the bottom of this document, you'll see all of the GA4 documentation, and then this will take you through how to set up the events, and it gives you the choice of Google Tag or Tag Manager, and then it gives you the specific code for each of the different things that you want to do there. So that's pretty well documented. If you take the Google Tag Manager route, again, documentation is here for you, and then there's a guide of how to implement that, and it will tell you how to create the GA4 event tag, the configuration tag, and so on. So it's just a case of following that guide there. An example of GA4 configured, in this case on a Shopify store, the GA4 tag in Google Tag Manager is split into two parts. There's what we would class as the GA4 configuration or base pixel here, and that is just a built-in tag for Google Tag Manager. So you create this one first of all, pop your measurement ID in there. You can set additional settings if you want them in there, if you want other stuff to track as well, but out of the box, this tag with the measurement ID running on all pages will normally work for you. And then to set up additional events, you use the Google Analytics 4 GA4 events tag, and then select the GA4 configuration tag that you previously set up, and then create your event name and any parameters and the values that you want to be pushed with that. Get it to fire before, get a GA4 configuration tag to fire before the event, and then trigger it on the firing trigger that you want in there. But the bog standard installation, the same as just pasting that piece of code in. The example that was given in Google Tag example is just a case of putting that GA4 configuration in there. So a couple of different options there for you. If you choose an app, plugin or module, then that's all done for you. If you have Google Tag Manager installed on your website already, then I'd encourage you to use the GA4 tag within Tag Manager. Do it on there and follow the guide on here using the Tag Manager option, and that will take you through all those different steps that you need to make. You won't need to place the Google Tag Manager snippets on your website because they'll be there already. Malik has asked a question: do you fire the configuration on DOM ready as opposed to all pages in all cases? No, is the question. No is the answer to that question. Within Google Tag Manager, there are a number of different ways that you can fire a tag. It can occur on a page view. It can occur on something called DOM ready, and it can also occur on a specific event. So if you were, in most cases, I would use I would get the GA4 configuration tag to fire on what we call an all pages DOM ready event. And what that means is GA4 will not fire until the web page itself is loaded, and the document object model is loaded properly. It's all complete, and in normal human being terms, it means when the little swirly thing has stopped moving, when a page is loaded in the browser, then at that point it would fire the GA4 configuration tag. The reason that we use the DOM ready event is because the way that Google Tag Manager container code is injected into some platforms. If you take the Google Tag Manager for WordPress plugin by Thomas Geiger, for example, you have the option to dynamically inject the snippet in there. So if you said page view, what might happen then is you're trying to fire an event or trying to fire a tag on an event that hasn't occurred yet, because the page view might occur before the Google Tag Manager software has loaded. So in most cases, I set it to DOM ready. It's actually better for the user experience. It stops it stops interfering with page loads and increases the performance of a website. So in most cases, I would use DOM ready. By default, most people will just select all pages, which basically means when somebody's viewed a page. And that can give you some issues with data quality, because you probably, in some cases, won't capture all of the information or all of the data from a page view. And then Liam's asked a question: what will be the difference between creating events in GA4 itself versus creating events in GTM via GA4 event? A really good question. And again, Google don't do a very good job of explaining how this works. We always set the events up either in Google Tag Manager, or we hard code them using the Google tag. So here we can see there's an event name called add to cart. Now we would set it up in here in Google Tag Manager, or we would set a piece of code up to deliver that as well. And then that will flow into GA4 and you'll see that in the interface. if you were to create the event within within GA4 itself, where we saw earlier on the opportunity to modify and create events, then what that does is it creates an event listener. So it looks for when something has occurred on the website. So when an event has occurred, or if somebody, let's say, for example, if somebody clicks a particular button, then you create an event listener for that. Now, if you've got absolutely no control over the code on your site, and that can sometimes happen with booking systems, for example, you have no control other than you can just put the GA4 Google tag code on that platform, then you would use the GA4 modify event in that situation. But the best way is always to have the developer code it in for you, or use Google Tag Manager to push that event, because you get much finer control of how that works. And also, what you will tend to find is developers will change code, make upgrades, particularly with booking system providers and ticketing providers, and they're not very good at documenting those changes. So what you might find then is you end up with multiple events that are firing. So you can use the setup in GA4 in the web-based tool if you've got no control other than being able to paste the that code on there. So again, if we go into the tag instructions there and install manually, you might only have the opportunity to put this one piece of code into the booking system. If that's the case, then modify the events in GA4, set them up yourself. But the preferred method is to use an application, use Google Tag Manager, or get a developer to hard code the event for you. So let's go back up here. So so there's the there's the different options you've got in terms of the installation and the configuration side of things. So to recap, you get your property settings set up, you create your web data stream, enable enhanced measurement, or keep it enabled unless you really don't want to track that. Look at the cross-domain measurement to make sure that you've got that sorted out for any additional domains that you need to track within your estate. You can define internal traffic if you want to. At this point, I wouldn't. I would just get get things going first of all, get some data flowing in, and the same with unwanted referrals. Wait until you've got some transactions that have come in, some events that have come in, and then make sure that they're all set properly. And if we've got any things that aren't working right, if you're getting incorrect attribution, then at that point you can go and change some of those things. If you want to then separate internal traffic, you can do that at that point. So just a couple of other things to go through now. After that, we've got in here now the property has been set up. We've got property settings, not a lot extra in there. Data streams is how we get through to that newly created data stream. But what we do need to change are data settings. And within data settings, you've got data collection. This allows you to use the Google Signals data collection. And again, this will give you more data, particularly around Google advertising features. So you just go through that, activate it, that's it done. You need the user data collection acknowledgement. So you acknowledge that to say that you're happy to receive that and you're making people aware of what data you're collecting. And the advanced settings to allow for ad personalization is enabled by default, in this case for 306 regions. Data retention by default is set to just 2 months. So I'd always change that to 14 months. And again, as long as it matches your policy, that's fine. And then reset user activity on new, reset user data on new activity, I leave that ticked on. Data filters, I tend not to change that at this point. Data import allows us to bring external data in. We'll be covering that in one of probably again session 8, where we're looking at bringing in external data from different sources. And that's pretty much it for the setup of the property itself. You have got a few of these other bits and pieces which you know, are more advanced, and you know, you might need to delete data in some cases if you've accidentally recorded PII. You might want to change the default attribution model, but the attribution model in Universal Analytics is last non-direct click, but the default in GA4 is cross-channel data driven, which gives you a much better quality of data. It allows you to attribute traffic from multiple paths, multiple devices. It works much better. And you can then change the look back windows if you like, but again, I tend to leave these on the maximum allowed at that point. Things like Google Ad links and Google Merchant Center and Search Console, I would go through and link all of those up. At this stage, don't break the link with Universal Analytics and those products, but you just want to link in all of those other platforms that you want. So it really is a case of going to the product that you use, click on link, and then choose the Google Ads account that you want to link. So it's just again joining all of those different properties up together and all the products that Google have. So once you've done that, once you've got the code installed, then things will start to flow through, and you can start gathering some data at that point as soon as the code is installed via Tag Manager, hard-coded, or through an app. And then just a couple of things just before we end. With events, you may want to set up some additional events, and we'll go through this in custom configuration. But things like telephone clicks and email clicks should happen automatically, and you should see those. But you might want to put other things in there, like form completions that don't get recorded. And we would suggest that you'll do those with hard-coded again, or you would use a modification of plugins like WP Forms, for example. You know, you can set up the tracking in that way. But you might want button clicks and those sort of things. But all of that should start to come in automatically. If it isn't, then that's where we go and fine tune the installation of GA4. The one thing that you do need to ensure is put in place, if you've got an embedded YouTube video, if you read GA4's documentation, it says that it automatically tracks video interaction, plays, pauses, skips, and that sort of stuff. But only if in the code, in the embed code, you add this bit that says enable JS API equals 1. So any embedded YouTube videos that you've got, make sure that you've got this extra parameter set in the URL. Otherwise, it won't be able to track those interactions with the video there. Just another question with Liam. I know we're running over a little bit here, but we're nearly done. At the moment, all website appears to have gone overboard with cookie acceptance. Has something changed recently? We've had clients losing lots of data because of overzealous cookie firing. i.e. won't fire until decisions accepted, rejected. We see a lot of people worry about this, and that's actually one of the last things that I was just going to cover on here. GA4 allows you to integrate with content management platforms, and you can actually build your own content management platform if you like as well. So what Liam's referring to here is where you get a pop-up that comes on in front of the website when you first load it, and sometimes repeatedly loads despite what you've clicked on. But it gives people the opportunity to say, I don't want any tracking cookies, I don't want personalization cookies, I don't want functional cookies, or some other custom option. Now, within the Google tag for GA4, we can choose what goes, what data gets pushed to Google based on those decisions that people have made through the content management platform. So with that, I can't advise you. I'm not a legal person. I can't say, yes, you should have that. No, you shouldn't have that. This is a word and you should have whatever. I can only point you to a legal person to do that. But what we do find though is people that do implement all of that and to the letter of the law for the regions that they're in, they will lose data, because if people have got a if people have got the option that says if you just carry on and don't accept the cookies, then we won't record anything, then most people won't want to interact, and they'll just go and look at the website. So you're then not capturing that data. If you show a message that says to people, we're recording all of this data unless you tell us not to, then what we tend to find is people ignore that and they carry on using the website, and most people tend not to do anything about it. So it depends how extreme you are, what legal advice that you've got. But if you put obstacles in people's way in terms of tracking, then they will they'll just use the website and they won't use the tracking, and you will lose data. But it has got to, it's a legal decision that the business has got to make what they want to put in place with legal advice from their legal team. We can put in place anything that they want. GA4 supports all of those options natively, and that works very, very well. And I've got loads of examples of that in action if any of you need those examples. But in terms of what you legally put there and what you provide people with, that has got to be a decision that that the client or yourself have got to make. So I think that's it for this session. There's a little bit more detail here. What we'll see now is we've got, if you look at this document, I've scheduled the rest of the events in now. Session 3, next session is going to be the steps you need to take when you're migrating from Universal Analytics. So an extension of this really, but using some of the resources within Universal Analytics. And then I've started to introduce some session 4, slight change of time, mainly to make it easier for guys in the US and Canada to join us. But we'll be going through the actual reporting side of things, how to use GA4, and then going into really fine detail around explorations and how to build your own reports, how to debug, that sort of stuff. From session 8 onwards, that's going to be the more advanced sessions. We're going to be looking at measurement protocol and some of the other stuff. I'm probably going to leave that until December so we can get Black Friday, Cyber Monday out of the way. But then session 8 and onwards will be more advanced techniques. Thanks very much for everybody joining us here today. Just got another question from Malik saying, Can I pop the link over? So I've just put that in chat. But again, all the sessions will be recorded, and the link will be available sometime tomorrow. Thanks very much, everybody. Cheers.